back to the books I read this year video. This is books I read in 2024. The reality is, these are not actually the books I read in 2024. I just have deduced my reading list to the library so much that these are the only two books that I own. Hi, Sadie. These are the only two books that I own that I read. The rest of them were from either borrowed or the library. So, this is just a prop. Anyways, I, again, am on Goodreads. I'm pretty sure my username is just @RachelHarris. Also, these are not real glasses. These are just blue light glasses. I just wanted to look cute for the thumbnail. Anyways, also, I'll be reading some of my reviews of the books that I read for this video. So, let's start off strong. The very first book I read this year was The Book Thief. This was the book I got from Mr. Joe from our annual tradition of book exchange for Christmas. It was a fantastic book. I would highly recommend it. I rated it 4 stars on Goodreads. But yet again, I was crying my eyes out in this book. It was about Nazi Germany, so of course you can expect that it was really sad. The one thing I got out of this book was its beautiful writing. The writing style was gorgeous. Like, it was like beautiful to read. So yeah, definitely suggest that. Another thing I wrote is that it's kind of similar, I feel like, to All the Light We Cannot See. You also grow really attached to all the characters throughout this book. So, again, one of the reasons why it makes it sad, because you just love the characters so much. The next book I read was called Untamed Shore by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. Not sure how to say that. This was an okay book. I gave it 3 stars. It was a quick and easy read. It was good for summer. It wasn't summer when I read this, it was January. But if you're just looking for like a little rom-com novel to read at the beach or at the pool, this one was good. Next up was The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. This book wrecked me. It was so sad and so beautiful and so good. I gave it 5 stars, 5 out of 5, and I didn't even write a review. I was so wrecked. I was suggested this book by Mary, and she was like, this is the best book I've ever read, like, you have to read it, and I finally got around to reading it, and I have to agree. It's definitely one of the best books I've ever read. It goes to the story of these soldiers in Vietnam, but it's written so beautifully. Like, the writing is just amazing, and the stories are just touching, and a heart-wrenching story about these soldiers in Vietnam and like what they had to go through and what they encountered, but it's written so beautifully that it's just amazing. So 10 out of 10 would recommend. That's the book I always recommend to everyone who always asks me for book recommendations. Next up, in stark contrast to what I just talked about, is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. So this was a super popular book at the time I read it. I think it probably still is. So I was like, I'll give it a try. Popular books are usually pretty good. They're popular for a reason, right? I wasn't a fan at all. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. In my review, I said that the writing style was kind of cool and it was entertaining to read. It felt like you were reading like someone talks. So it's about this boy who lives in southwestern Virginia. People from southwestern Virginia talk a certain way, so hence the book was written like those people talk. So that was kind of cool. It was different than anything I've ever read before, but overall it was just really pitiful, sad, and disturbing. I said it just never seemed to get better. The entire book was a sob fest. So I guess it was everything the reviews chalked it up to be, but I'm just not a fan of totally pitiful stories. So, I mean, if you like sad books, this is definitely the one to read. After that, I was like, okay, I gotta lock in on my book game because I've not been reading the best books ever since, like, I want to read another really good one, like The Things They Carried. So I was like, this author wrote the best book ever, so I'm going to read another book by him. So the next book I read was America Fantastica by Tim O'Brien. I was a little bit disappointed because I was expecting so much. I feel like if I wasn't expecting so much, it wouldn't have been as bad as I reviewed it to be. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, so not terrible, but because of The Things They Carried, I was just expecting like another groundbreaking novel. Another reason why I didn't really care for this book a lot was because I felt like there was some underlying satire or alternate story beneath the one that was like on the top, like the first story. And I just wasn't catching on to that underlying story. So I was kind of confused, and I was like, maybe if I knew the background and like the reason that he wrote this book and like the underlying story, then I would like it better. Next up, I read from the juvenile or young adult section of the library. I was like, let's just breeze through something easy, something fun. And it was The Beginning of Everything by Robin Schneider. I gave this, again, 3 out of 5 stars. I said it was a great summer read, it was super easy to understand. It was the perfect break between long and difficult books and the chance to get caught up in a meaningless story just for fun. Next up, I finally have it. The Giver. This is like one of 2 books I actually have, and it's super small, size small, tiny. So The Giver by Lois Lowry. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Again, so straight down the middle. I feel like with this kind of book, you either love it or you hate it. It's super sci-fi and like really weird. Like, it's a whole alternate universe. So it's kind of strange, not the kind of book I usually read. I'm not usually a huge fan of sci-fi. I don't regret reading it. It was pretty good. I just am not a huge fan of sci-fi, so that's that. Next up was Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak. I figured that I loved his first book, The Book Thief, so much that I would try another book by him. And that was a bad decision. Some authors are just one-hit wonders. Markus Zusak is one of them. I gave The Bridge of Clay 1 out of 5 stars. I actually didn't even finish reading it. I got maybe a third of the way through, and then I was like, I can't read this anymore. I feel like I dread reading it, and I'm always like, oh, I don't want to read it, but I pick it up and I start reading it, and then I get discouraged, and I would put it down. I'd be like, why did I read that? I just wasted my time. So yeah, I was just really confused. The story never picked up. I just had to put it down. I got to page 136. Next up was Wait for Me by Sarah Shepard. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars with no explanation. So it was pretty much like a little mystery, but it was like located at the beach. Like the setting was the beach. This girl is kind of like discovering something that happened a long time ago, but she keeps getting flashbacks of things that happened, and she keeps waking up in like weird places. It's just that mystery of how she has to figure out what's going on with all that. Next up was a historical fiction, so moving on to kind of a different genre. It's called When Summer Was Ours by Roxanne Velasquez. I don't know how to say that. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, so pretty good. This was a wonderful summer read. The story was entertaining and the book was eloquently written. It was overall very enjoyable. It's about this girl who is living in Germany in World War II, and she is an art preserver, like she preserves art. And so she tries to go through and rescue the art from the Nazis because they're burning art. There's other characters involved, and she has to try and protect her grandma and her boyfriend, and it's really a fun story if you like historical fiction. All my friends at the pool or at work were reading Family of Liars, so I had to hop on the bandwagon and I ended up reading it, borrowing it from one of my friends at work, and I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars, so pretty average. This is the prequel to We Were Liars, which I read years ago. I think it's coming up on like 3 or 4 years ago now that I read that. But that was a super good book. I remember reading it and being like absolutely shocked because the plot twist is crazy. I was hearing mixed reviews from people who read it before me, so I was like, okay, mixed reviews, let me try it. It ended up being just fine. I was a little bit confused and a little bit disinterested the entire time I was reading it. But overall, it summed up to be not as good as the first book, the We Were Liars. Okay, next up, Word D by Frida McFadden. Oh my gosh. This is when I finally got put on my new favorite author of as of right now. I read this in August while I was at the beach. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I read it in 2 days. Frida McFadden is a murder mystery author, and our whole family has been reading all her books like nonstop ever since then. And so like we have family book club meetings about them, and it's so fun. It's very suspenseful, but it's so good. There's a crazy plot twist, of course. Every Frida McFadden book has a crazy plot twist. After that, I was still at the beach, and after that I was like, I need to calm down. This was just so stressful. So I need a like relaxing beach read while I'm here. So then I picked up The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walther. This was a relaxing, perfect beach read, exactly what I wanted it to be. Completely opposite from the thing I just finished. Not a riveting mystery, but just interesting enough to keep you engaged and entertained. In other words, a perfect beach read. Okay, next, The Beautiful Eucharist. This was a 5 out of 5 star book. It's super short. We got this for free from my church. It's just a bunch of testimonies of people in their encounter of Jesus in the Eucharist. There's one about this Muslim guy, written by this Muslim guy, and it's his story about discovering Jesus in the Eucharist in his journey from Islam to Catholicism, which was really interesting.
Okay, pause. My camera died here. So I'm just gonna say that this was such a fantastic book. I gave it 5 stars, and I would definitely recommend this to anyone who is trying to get into Catholicism or just wants to reignite their love for Jesus in the Eucharist. It's super easy to read, and I would definitely suggest it to anyone.
Getting exhausted. 22 books is a lot. Alright, third try of this author for the year. I read In the Lake of the Woods by Tim O'Brien. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I was expecting it to be good because I loved the things they carried and this author, but I just still wasn't impressed. So I think I have to say that the things they carried was Tim O'Brien's best book, and I'm not going to say a one-hit wonder because these books weren't bad, they just weren't really good. And this one was just, again, the main character was super pitiful, and it was a pretty slow book, not that like engaging, and it was also really sad. So those two things put together just makes for the kind of book that I don't really care for. So, Looking for Alaska by John Green. I gave this, take a guess, 3 out of 5 stars. I ended up saying that this book was pretty okay, not my favorite, not bad, not great. It didn't live up to all the hype, and I said that it felt kind of juvenile and childish. The writing wasn't very intellectual, and the story itself wasn't my favorite. However, I know people who really love this author and really love all his books. So, next, I read this book for school. It's called The Complete Persepolis. This was a graphic novel. I do not read graphic novels. This was for school. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Overall, I'm not a fan of graphic novels. But yeah, it was for school. So overall, for a school book, it was pretty engaging and I kind of liked it. Okay, Now I took the deep dive into trying out a Colleen Hoover book because Colleen Hoover is like, oh my gosh, the world's favorite author right now, I guess. So I was just like, okay, I'll try it out. So I read Verity by Colleen Hoover, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Yeah, it was a good mystery, but I kept expecting something scary to happen, and it never did. So the suspense made me want to keep reading it, but it didn't make me so scared that I couldn't read it at night. It did have me doubting the entirety of the whole book at the end. Like, I closed it and I was like, so was everything I read fake? And I was like really thinking about it after I finished it. I would probably recommend this book, but I still don't get all the hype over Colleen Hoover. Like, yeah, this was a good book, but like, it's not 5 stars. Next up was Just for the Summer. I gave this 5 stars. I'm not sure, looking back now, that I would actually give this 5 stars. It would probably still be a 4-star or a 3-star book. It's definitely a summer read. It's like relaxing rom-com book that nothing really huge happens, but the characters were so sweet and endearing. I really liked them, and you were really rooting for their happily ever after. Like, you really wanted them to have like a good ending. I read it as a standalone book, even though it says that it's number 3 in a series. I read it as a standalone and it was completely fine. There was no references to other books. It wasn't like dependent on having read something else. So yeah, great beach read. Definitely recommend this if you're looking for something to read by the pool or at the beach this summer. And now we go on a Freida McFadden binge reading streak. Next up, I read The Inmate by Freida McFadden, 5 out of 5 stars. After reading a summer book in the fall, I was really ready to get away from the rom-coms and get into like the nice mysteries where it was nice and cozy outside and I could still go up in my blanket. And this perfectly encapsulated what I wanted for that like feeling. And so I was really generous on my rating because of that. Next up is One by One by Freida McFadden. This was another cold, dark, lost in the forest mystery, which was exactly what I wanted. I read this super fast in like 2 weeks, which is fast for me in the school year because I have like a lot of school, so I don't have a whole lot of time to read. Freida McFadden books aren't super scary. They're just really suspenseful, and so like they're not too scary to read at night. But like they're really suspenseful. Like you're like on the edge of your seat, like reading, and you can't stop reading, and you're just like, what is gonna happen? And yeah, you can't stop reading. And then like everyone in our family, since we are obsessed with reading Freida McFadden, everyone's like reading like, and then people will gasp and they'll be like, oh! And we'll like, oh, what happened? And then they'll be like, oh my gosh, this just happened, because like we all have read it and it's just so fun and they're so engaging. Alright, last but not least, book number 22 of 2024 was Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This was a 3-star book. It was really scary. I couldn't read this book at night because I was actually scared, and it just gave me the creeps because it's based on something that I feel like would really happen, like really in real life. It's about this girl who gets kidnapped in someone's car. Like, she's taking a ride home from college and she gets in the car with this random guy who's like giving her a ride, and he goes off track, and she's like wondering whether or not he's the serial killer who's been on the loose at her college. And also it was like super psychological because this girl has like serious like mental illness or something, but she's kind of schizophrenic, and she like keeps like dozing off into these like psychotic episodes where she's like sees things that aren't really there. And So it's really psychological and you don't know what's real and what's not real. If you like psychological thriller movies, this book was just like that. Overall, I probably wouldn't read something by Riley Sager again because this is the kind of books that she writes. But if you like horror movies, then you could read this horror book. I just probably wouldn't read it again. Altogether, that was my books I read in 2024. Pulling out the prop again. So a lot of these books are books that I'm planning to read in the upcoming months. So like sneak peek on what I'm reading in 2025. Thanks for watching again the third video in a row of my book recommendations. If you want to follow me on Goodreads, you can stay updated throughout the year on what I'm reading. And yeah, you should totally subscribe. And I'll see you again next year for books I read in 2025.